Andrew Morton's much derided inside story of the disastrous marriage of Charles and Diana, which proved those experts fools, the British have good reason to thank irresponsible journalism. Whisper it softly, but there are still those in the darker corners of Whitehall and Westminster who feel that even Andrew Gilligan was far more right than he was wrong. What are my qualifications for discussing British journalism? This is decidedly not a memoir, but I have used episodes in my career as jumping-off points for larger arguments. I've been a general reporter, a sub-editor, a parliamentary reporter, a political journalist, a radio presenter, a broadsheet and a tabloid columnist, a hilariously inexperienced newspaper editor, an author, a maker of TV documentary series, and am now, as the BBC's political editor, a television reporter. I've not been a sports reporter or written about dogs and fashion, yet, but I do sometimes write as a guinea pig. I have, in short, done many jobs in modern journalism. On the way, I've been a near alcoholic, the disloyal friend of ministers and prime ministers, engaged in savage and surreal boardroom rows, and learned what to do when the TV camera lights go out and a piercing whistle blows the newsreader's question out of an oversized ear. I've worked with heroes and liars, haggled with proprietors, and learned many of the dirty tricks of one of the dirtiest trades in the land. I didn't decide to become a journalist. Despite having a first-class degree and having read an unfeasibly large number of books, it began to dawn on me that I couldn't actually do anything. I couldn't sing, act, tell jokes, play any musical instrument, hit, kick, or catch a ball, run for more than a few yards without panting, speak another language, or assemble things without them falling apart immediately. I was a scientifically illiterate innocent with the entrepreneurial instincts of a 13th century peasant and the iron determination of a butterfly. Journalism seemed the only option. Even then it was a bit intimidating. At university there had been lean young men and handsome women who were always too busy to speak and rarely smiled, except ironically, and who phoned diary items to newspapers in London. Unlike me, they didn't spend most of their time on marches supporting an ungrateful working class or drinking. One has ended up as editor of the Financial Times, another is a distinguished foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times. One of the early stars of my time returned a year after leaving university to interview me about a rebellion then going on in the Cambridge English faculty, which Panorama thought might be interesting for a short film. He arrived at the pub wearing a trench coat. If he didn't actually have a trilby with a paste card reading Press stuck on one side of it, the effect was much the same. "Robert Harris, BBC, Panorama," he said, holding out his hand without a flicker of a smile. "Hi, Robert," I replied. I thought he was a complete prick. And then I thought almost instantaneously, and that's exactly the kind of complete prick I want to be too. Since broadcasting only involved speaking, and therefore didn't involve learning to type, it seemed a more attractive option than trying to get a newspaper job. On the train down to London, I read The Economist, well, several pages of it at least. Though I wore a second-hand tweed jacket and a wool tie to show how serious I was, I carefully pinned on my Anti-Nazi League badge, my CND badge, and my Eastern European Solidarity Campaign badge to show that I was also interested in current affairs. Oh yes, and I had an orange beard. At an office opposite Broadcasting House, we were asked to read various texts into a microphone, and we were questioned about politics. I found it all very easy. So easy, in fact, that I had a couple of pints at lunchtime to relax myself before the main afternoon interview. It was very hot. With time in hand, I went for a rest in Regent's Park. I lay down. It was really very hot. I fell asleep. My interview was at 3 p.m. I woke at 2:59, sprinted back to Portland Place, and arrived there, bright red, to go with the orange beard, bathed in sweat, and my mind a complete blank. After 3 or 4 questions from a panel of interviewers, I noticed that they were talking very slowly and smiling in a kindly, reassuring fashion. "What would you like to do at the BBC?" asked the lady. That was a very interesting question, and I sat silently for more than a minute wondering about it, smiling back to show that I was friendly. "Would you like